Hello everyone, welcome to Sword and Book Studio. This is artist and teacher Raymond Lopez. Today I want to go a little bit back to the basics, just make sure that we establish how important they are. They're the backbones of art making and design, whether you're doing photography, whether you're doing drawing, whether you're doing painting, whether you're doing design, whether you're doing illustration. There's two different ideas that I want to talk about today. One of them is the elements of art, and the other one is the principles of design. Okay, they go hand in hand, however, don't confuse one for the other. The elements of art are line, shape, form, value, color, texture, and space. I almost ran out of space on my paper for the word space. One more time, backwards. Space, texture, color, value, form, shape, and line. Okay? Line is any mark made on a surface with a tool. Your tool could be a stick, and the surface could be the sand, still considered a line. Some people also call line, or they describe it as a point that moves through space. The smallest type of mark you could make would be a point or a dot, and as soon as it starts to move, it starts to create a line. Shape is an enclosed line. It's a two-dimensional enclosed area. So if you grab a line and you kind of finish where it starts and it encloses a shape, whether that shape is geometric or organic, still considered a shape, and it's always flat and two-dimensional. Think of a sticker that you might peel off of a piece of paper, slap it onto something else. That means that it's flat, it's two dimensions. Form is the illusion of something that has volume, something that is three-dimensional, so it would have height, width, and also depth. In math, they call it length, width, and height, which always confused me, which is, I guess, why I'm not a math teacher. Form is something that has three-dimensional qualities. It could be organic, and it could be geometric. Value is tones. It's when you start to add shading. It's when you have lightness or darkness to something, and it also refers to the lightness or the darkness of a hue. Every single color, which is the next one, every single color has value embedded in it. Yellow, by its very nature, is lighter than purple. Then those crayons come right out of the box. Texture is the illusion of how something might feel, so it's the tactile qualities of a surface, whether it's smooth or glossy, or matte, or satin, or some people say sateen, okay? Sometimes texture is an illusion, sometimes it's actual texture, so it looks and feels how it actually is. And then lastly, we have space. Space is the illusion of depth in a work of art. It also has to do with figure, ground relationships, background, middle ground, foreground. Ooh, I did that backwards. The background would be back here, the middle ground, and the foreground. Okay? So, I like to think of the elements of art as the ingredients to art making. Okay? The elements of art are the basic visual symbols in the language of art. If there was a dictionary, it would only have those 7 words in it, because all of the art that is visual stems from those ideas, those words. So again, the elements of art: line, shape, form, value, color, texture, space. Those are the ingredients. Now, onto the recipe, which is the principles of design. I came up with this acronym, PVC bumper. If you steal it, give me credit. All right, that's my creation out of years of research as an art teacher and as an artist. I went ahead and combined different principles of design that I kept finding, and I combined as many of them as possible into this easy to remember acronym, being brought to you via YouTube, free of charge. There you go, free knowledge. PVC bumper. Principles of design are the rules or guidelines that artists and designers follow to make art and design work more aesthetically pleasing, okay, which is subjective, but a lot of people will agree if something looks bad, and a lot of people will also agree if something looks good. It usually has to do with any number of these guidelines that I'm going to talk about right now. So the P in PVC bumper is pattern, Okay, a pattern is a two-dimensional surface decoration. So think of a printed pattern on a backpack. That's just fabric that was then stitched into a backpack. Think of wallpaper or gift wrap. Anything that takes a boring, plain surface and decorates it with a repeated motif becomes a pattern, okay? There's 5 types of pattern: regular, alternating, flowing, progressive. Can't remember the last one. It'll come to me later and I'll correct myself. Pattern, right? Variety is when within an artwork or a design work there's visual differences. Okay, contrast is visual opposites. Okay, so variety, think of a bowl of Skittles, right? Taste the rainbow. Contrast is when you have opposites, right? Think of a checkerboard or things that are black and white, or opposite uses of color or opposite uses of textures or shapes. Things that are opposite of each other is going to make your design or your artwork more interesting. Balance is the idea of equalizing visual forces. So if you have a blank surface and you put a dot on it, that's a visual force. How do you balance that dot in relation to the rest of the picture plane is dealing with balance. There's 3 types of balance: symmetry, asymmetry, and radial symmetry. Okay, so symmetry is the idea of dividing your picture plane equally. Symmetry, right? What you do to one half, you're going to do to the other. Radial balance is regardless of how you divide your picture plane, both halves will be equal. It usually has to do with a circle, which is another word for radial. And lastly, we have asymmetry, the hardest one of them all to create visually pleasing, balanced artwork or design work. Asymmetry has to do with not using symmetry or radial balance. Good luck with that one. A common use of asymmetry is the rule of thirds, but it's not the only type of asymmetry. Okay? Good. So, on to unity and harmony. I couldn't really squeeze the H in my acronym, so I just slap it next to unity and harmony. They're very similar. It's creating a feeling of togetherness, right? So in an artwork, there's a lot of different ways that you can make things look like they belong together. You can put them close together. You can have all of the colors relate to each other. Anything that makes your artwork look like the pieces of it get along with each other, that has to do with creating unity and harmony. The last thing that you want to do in your artwork or your design work is creating multiple artworks or design works within that one artwork or design work. So unity and harmony is important because it kind of ties everything together, okay? Next up is movement. It has to do with a feeling of action. So even within a still image, which is most of 2D design work and artwork, you can create a feeling of movement or action, and that's going to bring a little bit of visual excitement to your artwork and makes it more interesting for your viewer to kind of scan through it and move around. So you can use leading lines, you can literally have an object that is frozen in time as it moves. Things like that are going to create movement within your design or your artwork. Next up, we have proportion. Proportion is the size relationships within a work of art or design work. So picture this for a second. Let's say that I have a car, right? Picture that car. You got your picture plane. Make it whatever car you want, right? You see the car. Can you really see it in your mind? Now put a toddler's ginormous feet next to the car. The car suddenly became the size of a toy. Okay, so proportion and size relationships within your art or design work, it makes your artwork make more sense. A sense of scale is important sometimes depending on what you're doing. You want to design a building, you want to make sure it looks like people can actually fit inside of the building. Things like that have to do with proportion. Next up, we have emphasis. So emphasis is when you are creating a little bit more of a focus or a visual dominance somewhere in your art or design work. This usually has to do with the first read. So there's a first read, which is your focal point. That's the main actor or the main actress. And then you have the supporting roles, which should never be as dominating as your focal point. The second read supports the first read. The third read is the surprise that you almost didn't see was there. So these different layers of reading artwork or design work are what make people sustain their interest in it a little bit longer. So emphasis can be created in a lot of different ways. You can do it using color, using contrast, using size, placement, oddity. All right, so these are all different kinds of ways that you might want to try creating a sense of emphasis or creating a focal point within your art or design work. Okay, what I recommend that you don't do is make all of the parts of your art and design work the same volume or the same level of visual loudness, because nobody's gonna know where to look first, and that gives people anxiety. So you want to avoid that. And lastly is rhythm. Rhythm has to do with visual repetition, not to be confused with pattern, okay? A visual repetition of elements or something within your art or design work is going to kind of move your eye through it and tie it all together in an interesting way. Think of telephone poles receding in the distance, right, in a landscape or a cityscape. You can also think of the difference between pattern and rhythm would be if you see a storefront, the pattern is printed on the shirts, but the repetition of the shirts, maybe one of them is red pattern, one of them is a blue pattern, one of them is a green pattern. The fact that they're repeated, they're all the same shirt, but the pattern is slightly different. The fact that they're all repeated is rhythm, okay? So sometimes within a art or design work, it makes sense to create visual repetition to kind of lead the eye through it, kind of tie it all together. So the elements of art are the ingredients, okay? Elements of art, line, shape, form, value, color, texture, space. Those are the ingredients, and the recipe that you follow would be the principles of design. PVC bumper, pattern, variety, contrast, balance, unity, harmony, movement, proportion, emphasis. Now, all of these ideas do not have to be used within one art or design work. Pick a couple of them, work with them individually, and try to extort, try to. Man, I was doing so good, right? I think I'm gonna stop here, but yeah, I'm just gonna cut this out. I'm gonna cut this out.